Welcome everyone, Grand Gnosis Master Dr. Thor Templar here, and let's cover another misunderstood occult thing. Nobody does any research whatsoever apparently except myself. The Baphomet. This has been something that has been shanghaied, abducted, dragged away with a noose around its neck by the usual low-level life Satanists and left-hand pastors. I mean, this came into recent publicity again with the very demonic show that is now being shown everyone's, the Dark Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I guess they perverted everything. Now let's pervert Archie comics. Of course, you got to remember that the Black Lodge and Satanists have no history. They do copies and basic Black Lodge rituals are basically debasing the original. They'll do the Christian masses backwards. They use things backwards. You'll take the pentagram, a sign of Venus, and been used for thousands of years, and turn it upside down and claim it for themselves. Well, they have no originality. They can't do anything. They're really one of the lowest based belief systems out there. And of course, they copy everything. Now, one of the things that happened with the Baphomet is that's been turned into this demonic symbol by Satanists who have claimed it. Now, this comes from the practices of Anton LaVey, who stole the Baphomet's head. Now, where it actually comes from, the original Baphomet, which is basically more of the god of witches, originally was... And the only drawing and only reference made to it was by Epis Levi, a pseudonym for the ex-priest that he was. He was kicked out of the priesthood, the Catholic Church, because of his fornication and drunkenness. Screwing around with everybody and everything and so forth. So he was kicked out of the church. And then to survive, he wrote these quasi-magical books. So he's written a few of them, which of course were written in French, because that's what he was. So he, in one of his major books, had a picture of the Baphomet there, which is basically the actual king of the witches, is really what it portrays. There's nothing satanic about it per se at all. It shows the very dual nature of what is considered a combination of many different symbols which are at use at that time, particularly Celtic symbols that use the animal head and other things. It's been further bastardized even by the Satanists who grabbed it and used it recently by deleting the androgynous nature of it, by taking the breasts off of it because they didn't want controversy, because they're the cowardice little Satanists they are. Well, why have sexual symbols in a society that don't like that? Because you're so tough and so into sex, like these Satanists like to think they are. What a bunch of weasels. So where does all this come from? Well, Levi started to extrapolate on this to some degree, and of course it was completely and totally made up by him and the artist that he commissioned to draw it, but it's a composite of a lot of different pagan symbols, and it makes a lot of sense, and there's really nothing satanic about it whatsoever. His original drawing, which has a pentagram on the forehead of the Baphomet, was in an upright position, which means positive or flowing with the universe energies, instead of upside down, which is a negative control. Domination, which is considered demonic in nature. So having female breasts on there, using an animal body to show more of a, really was symbolizing a male organ, having a actual animal body at the bottom without actually showing male genitalia, which would be objectionable. And people can actually look at this. You can go on Wikipedia and look at the original Epis Levi drawing for the 19th century to see the aspects there. You know, it is showing and it's very powerful image that was produced here, because it represents the positive and the negative. There are two Latin words on there, one that means solve and or dissolve, and the other one means to actually clot or bring together. So as usual with translations, it's always difficult because of the primitiveness of non-English languages. But it actually shows positive and negative. It's got sun symbols, and it's also got moon symbols, dark and light of the moon. It has fire. It has the animalistic characters of human nature blended with sexuality, showing a female breasts, and then moving into animal type legs, which again, as I mentioned, is more of a phallic type symbol without showing it. And of course, it has the kundalini type flow of energy coming up from the center of the body. So it's a very powerful and very profound way of looking at things. And of course, this has been demonized by modern people today. And of course, as soon as something is demonized by Christian church in particular, it's then grabbed on by Satanists as, yeah, this is ours, which isn't true whatsoever. So this is basically a very good representation. I've always been fascinated by this and captivated by the actual drawing of Baphomet. And it has absolutely nothing to do with satanic or evil beliefs, which Satanism is reverse Christianity to begin with. Of course, Epis Levi was a Catholic defrocked priest. But he talked about this, and then, of course, these things supposedly were then connected in many ways. Now, the one way they were connected in modern times was the fact that, of course, Anton LaVey, who took the Baphomet head and put it into a pentagram. Some people claim that this was put into a reverse pentagram in towards the beginning of the 19th century by a French occultist. It's a little bit obscured where that actually came from, but Anton LaVey actually stated that. Now, that he took that or modified it, and we can see that in what is used today with the Church of Satan in their Black Flame and other place publications. The Baphomet came up through a lot of distorted and bad information with the Knights Templar and so-called inquisitions that went on there. But I mean, all this information is so poorly put together that there's no way really to tell. The Knights, the Aleister Crowley came along and translated the French works of Levi, and as he does with everything, he took this image and stated that it was definitely satanic and that it was definitely connected to the Templars, who were Satanists. Now, this is totally off his own belief system with no evidence backing it up, which is very typical of the lying scumbucket that Aleister Crowley, the demon worshiper pervert, was known for. So the whole idea is that more contrived stuff that muddies an already muddied water. Now, the Knights Templars left nothing in terms of written documents. Everything they had was destroyed and burned by themselves at the time of persecution, even before it. So we really have nothing to go by. There is a, not really similar, but there are some carvings of grotesques, some people call them gargoyles, on some Templar temples of a man-headed person, a man with breasts and crossed legs, hooven legs like this, which is interesting, but not really very close to what this is. But apparently, Levi, who obviously was in Christian church and went to these temples and noted these statues being more occult oriented, then took these images and made it into his own again. And this is the problem, how things are used. It's hard to really know what all these grotesques actually meant, how they were carved, what the meaning of them was. Certainly there is something in the ballpark, but not really very close to what this looks like. I mean, it's missing a lot of the main potent details of it. The fact of a half man, half female is not something overly unique in the annals of different mythological structures. There's also a what appears to be and it may not be a man whatsoever, but they look very manly, which is pretty much what medieval or even past that female bodies were thought of as attractive, that were somewhat similar to this done by Joseph von Hammer Purgstill. In 1856, with the time of his death, he wrote some books and he found some quasi looking, but I mean, it's still the symbology that was taken by Levi and used was very traditional of that time, and he combined many different things. And to think that you're going to have pentagrams and sun and moon energies is something that is very common to anyone who's trying to express a particular thought in an image. These are powerful things that everyone connected to. Joseph Purgstill's images also have Arabic language on them, which shows that it was probably not very Templar based as he claims they were. So when we move into these, but as I said, there is that actual carving there. There's a few around on these different buildings. I'm surprised somebody hasn't put together a definitive book on this. It certainly is interesting. But to think in some way that this was the symbol of demons, even with the actual other images of these so-called half man, half woman with the other things, these are not necessarily demonic in any ways whatsoever. And the fact that these images were used, and of course it's amazing how many of them took the actual female breasts away from it to make it more clear. And this is how things change. So you start seeing images like on the tarot cards, well, they took the female breasts out of it. They also changed the pentagram to upside down and called it the devil. Now, on the Rider Waite debt, well, this is a distortion of the entire image here. And this is very typical. So these are not in any way related to that. The fact that people claim things like the Nazis claimed the sun symbol, otherwise commonly known to Westerners as the swastika, which is still heavily used in India and other places as the sun symbol. It means good luck, and it was on everything prior to the Nazis using it in the 20s and late 30s. You will find books all over the place. It was put on coins. The swastika sun symbol is a luck symbol. But again, here it was misused. Now nobody uses it at all, except for it still is pretty common, surprisingly, in India, who I guess really doesn't care about the social implications. After all, they have more cell phones than toilets. So the ultimate problem is the fact that this is the kind of changes that are constantly taking place, and we can't really take anything overly serious. You need to know the greater ramifications, because people will grab things. Deliberate people like Aleister Crowley will go in and tell the Knights Templars are devil worshippers because this is their symbol. They certainly. Now, there was never anything found of the Templars. Hardly anything was found of them in general. There was no witnesses to anything. There was no people who came forward during this. The only thing ever happened with the Templars is that they supposedly stated things under horrific torture over 7 years, and the Grand Master recounted all this and was slowly burned at the stake for doing so, which shows you their dedication. So this is complete nonsense. There is certainly a momentous amount of evidence that shows that the Knights Templar were certainly doing their own varied Christianity that had to do more with the worship, most likely being a order that was started by a female worshiping group within the Catholic Church, is that they were connected to Sophie, wisdom, gnosis. Certainly seems that they were connected to, but there are many different Templars around the world, and after spending 200 years in the Holy Land, finding out the lies and misinformation that traditional Catholic Church brought them, it's highly unlikely that they had a traditional viewpoint, even though, and being so far away from the main church, they were able to do a lot of what they chose. But they certainly were not into satanic practices or so many other things. The Jesus myth certainly is hard to believe that anybody took that seriously, especially once you were stationed in the Holy Land for hundreds of years, that you would get all sorts of other stories, and that there basically was nothing that would tie them to that comic book story of Jesus. So the fact that they would move to the Sophie, and that's of course there was some misinterpretation that they were stating Baphomet or Maphet, when basically it came to an old word that meant Sophie. Is the latest research that's been done in that area. Certainly there were no Baphomets found, certainly none traditionally. And you're talking about when the Templars were dissolved, these books that are then written 500, 600 years later certainly could nowhere connect anything, and pretty much nobody knows anything about these societies because they were eliminated. And none of it seemed to have come out into other things. They were taken over by the actual people involved and were incorporated into the which is interesting, they would come into the Muslim-based Teutonic Knights, who have always been part of the Muslim-based supporters against Christianity. And that's for another story. But the whole idea is that there is no evidence. Nobody came out and testified against the Templars, interesting enough. Well, where were they? No other Templars who weren't tortured for 7 years came out with any of this. Many of the Templars went to Spain and became part of the Knights of Christ, and then some of them went other places. But, their time was over. They could not win a military victory, and basically turned into nothing more than a corporation, which nobody was interested in having a Christian corporation per se. And there was never that many knights, ultimately. It was a big industry with a few knights and very little ultimate success. They were kicked out of every place from that they went to, from Cyprus to every place, even the islands around where they couldn't hold any of it. So the point is that this really causes a huge problem in their whole history. But there's an awful lot to it, and the ending of the Templars and where they went into is a whole nother audio, which I hope to make someday. I initially have made part one of that, but there is a lot more to say in that area. But the Baphomet is not anything special. Again, it was taken by Anton LaVey, Aleister Crowley, as I've stated, as he perverts everything he got into and everything he did. He just summarily did that because it fitted into what he wanted. He was I don't know if you call him a Satanist per se. I mean, he didn't worship Satan, but he was a black magician dealing with evil, negative, reverse forces, and that's what he's into. He found that fun, interesting. He was a very disturbed person, but why people are going to take his word for anything shows their lack of scholarly research and their misinterpretation of what Crowley basically was all about, and getting through the gloss of the books that he wrote on practical magic, which are pretty good, that he stole from the Golden Dawn, his porno poetry that he was so famous for, and his basic debauchery and homosexuality, which influenced everybody he was with, is the reality of this person. And to gloss over those things is to misinterpret the facts. Aleister Crowley was an ardent homosexual. He was a black magician, and he enjoyed decay and debauchery. That's what he was all about. And he was able to do that because he was a rich kid and was able to convince some pretty mentally disturbed female rich kids who supported him over the years. So all of this is to go that his qualifications of this, many hundreds of years even after the writing of the Epis Levi document, and hundreds and hundreds of years prior to that of what the so-called Templars did, is absurd. It's bad scholarship, and it's plain wrong. The Baphomet is nothing more than a god of witches. It's a potent, powerful, and you can draw energy from it for positive things. The fact that it has been Nazified, that the symbol has been stolen by the dregs of society, has nothing to do with its original meaning, at least not in the gross manner. The problem is, if you walk over symbols that have been, which is the whole part of the Black Lodge and evil people taking them, have been defiled and made their own, which means they've taken some important symbol from you, and you ought to understand how important a symbol is if they're stealing it. The problem is you cannot walk around anywhere in the world except India using the swastika and not get the feedback of the now polluted and defamed and fouled symbol that has come down to be because of the use of it by a very perverse society. So this is the problem. So if you were to put up pictures of this as a positive magical group around, let's say, where you were having a lecture on your books, people are going to look at that and say they're Satanists because they're using this Satanist symbol. So unfortunately, it's been frequently destroyed and messed up, and now its original meaning and the original energy connected to it, which is the most important thing that occultists should understand, meaning the energy connected to the swastika and the Baphomet now has been changed from positive to negative. So it doesn't have a positive effect on you. It's in your consciousness as a negative symbol, and as such, that's what it will generate for you.